boss. I'm head cat herder. Are we all online and everything?
And close the lines over there because the lighting. Oh, it is closed. That's the problem.
Yeah, you'd be all right.
Well, it doesn't show up on the screen. It blinks in and out, yeah.
And for what it's worth, while we're getting started, the combined materials, I thought that was a great way to do it.
Good. I agree.
Okay,
Great. So it is.
I don't know. I don't think turning off the overhead would be a good idea. We've never really had that issue before.
Yeah,
So we,
not sure what's causing it.
and the camera's in the same position it's always in. I think
Yeah.
that's glowing.
Right, exactly.
Do you want me to try it? Opening the shade, but I don't think that would help.
I don't, well, I don't know.
Never know. Get something with the light.
It's get darker in the opposite direction.
It's not coming from the window, it's coming
Yeah.
from the overheads.
Can you turn these off in sequence or they all go off?
You know,
Yeah,
they
so I
all-
That's nice.
Yeah, that's-
And it's still false sensitive.
Yeah.
Of course, it's just you.
Oh, yeah, I think it's some lights. Oh, it's
It's
better.
Clear, a little blurry, but. it's
She's
fine.
She's always a little blurry. She's not the only one.
Well, it seems to have been-
Oh, yeah, it does. Thank you, Julie. That's
Great.
There you go.
Are we all online and everything?
Yes.
All right, great. Well, welcome to the January 30th, 2023 meeting of the Commission on Governmental Ethics and Election Practices. We're fortunate to have all 5 commissioners here in person this meeting, which is really great because we come from far-flung parts of the state. Sometimes it just doesn't work to get everybody here. So we're fortunate to have everybody here today. Let's start with the first agenda item, which is ratification of the minutes of the December 21st, 2022 meeting. Is there a motion? Then I'll make one. I move that we ratify the minutes of the December 21st, 2022 meeting. There's a second? Is there any discussion? Okay, we can take a voice vote. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. All opposed? Okay, it passes unanimous. Now, Jonathan has given us combined materials for the items 2, 3, 4, and 5, which I think is great. It cuts down on the paper, the massive paper that we sometimes get. It covers the common issues for those items. So on agenda item 2, we're looking at a request for a waiver of a late filing penalty from the Honorable Mark Lawrence. Is he there he is.
Thank you. And as we start off, I'm looking for how to change my title on this.
Well, I can probably do that.
Just change it to Senator, if you wouldn't mind.
I can't even see what it says.
It says Attorney Mark Lawrence, and I don't want to misrepresent the role, so I used it last week for a judicial conference, so
Yep.
I haven't changed it back.
Well, welcome, Senator Lawrence. We're going to, I'm going to ask Jonathan Wayne to give us a little background on the issue, and then you'll have a chance to address the commission. Jonathan?
Just wanted to say a few general remarks about the next 4 items. The way our campaign finance reporting schedule works is that there's a 13-day period just before the general election where that's after the reporting period for the last regularly scheduled report. So in that 13-day period, if a candidate receives a contribution of $1,000 or more, or makes an expenditure of $1,000 or more, they have to file a special report within 24 hours on sort of an accelerated deadline, and that way the information is available to the opponents and the public before the election. And we have advice about this in the quick guide, which is a short format explanation folder. Then we have a longer guidebook, and we have a one-page filing schedule. And then on October 25th, Lori Brand sent out an email to all the candidates saying with very explicit instructions what the report requirement is all about. This request is from State Senator Mark Lawrence, who was running for re-election, and the campaign made a payment of $5,000 for online digital advertising on November 2nd. So the campaign was required to file a 24-hour report on November 3rd, and it was late. And the way the penalties for this kind of violation adds up, because oftentimes the report is around 40 days late. They notice it in December when they're filing the post-election report. So in his case, the preliminary penalty was $5,000, which the staff views as definitely disproportionate to the level of harm. And so we are recommending a reduction to $500. Oftentimes we recommend a penalty in the range of $300 to $400. But the way the formula and the statute works, the preliminary amount goes up if there are successive violations. This was the second 24-hour report that was late, and there were some previous election cycles. There were a couple of late reports. So we thought that might be cause for a $500 penalty. I'll let Senator Lawrence speak to the reason for the waiver, but it had to do with a combination of work and family and campaign demands on his campaign manager. And his transaction was missed as a result.
Terrific, thank you. Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Wayne? Not at this point. Senator Lawrence.
Yes, thank you. So I'm not, the only exception I make, I'm not sure Jonathan was accurate in saying we had prior late filing reports in prior elections. We did have one in this cycle that was late. I think in a previous campaign, maybe it is late. We misfiled the expenses. We filed them when they were paid, not when they were incurred. So I don't know if that's what he's referring to as a late filing report. But anyway, that being aside, it was kind of a perfect storm in this campaign. Both my treasurer and I had difficult things going on in our families, and our campaign manager, Abby Sherwood, was going through a divorce in the fall. So things got kind of hectic, and she missed getting this $5,000 expenditure reported in a timely fashion. Had we known about it when we, filed the first late report, we would have filed it all at once and gotten it all done at once. But it's something she just missed, and the treasurer missed. And so just from my own personal perspective, I think, Abby's a great campaign manager, but this next campaign round, I think I'm going to look for somebody to do the reports who doesn't have kids and doesn't have some of the pressures that we're all three of us were facing.
Okay, thank you. Any commissioners have any questions for Senator Lawrence? No. Okay. I will move then that we reduce the fine to a $500 fine. Second. It's been moved and seconded that the fine be reduced to $500. Is there discussion? Yes, Commissioner Martin.
It's not so much discussion. I just want to convey to the senator, at least personally, that once again, we find ourselves in a position of understanding that human level of what goes on that you encapsulated pretty briefly, and have awareness and sensitivity of that, while we need to be consistent with practices and reinforce what the rules and regulations mean. So I'll be supporting the motion in this event.
And I would say that in this case, as in a couple of the other ones, it's a serious violation because the 24-hour report, the idea behind the 24-hour report is to give the public information in a timely way about large expenditures or large contributions. And in this case, and in a couple of the other ones, The public wasn't notified until after the election. And I think that kind of defeats the purpose of the statutory scheme in a lot of ways. So that's why I think a $500 fine is appropriate. Is there other discussion? Okay, we'll move to a vote, and we can do this by a voice vote. All in favor of a $500 fine, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, thank you. And thank you, Senator Lawrence.
Thank you very much.
We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Commissioner Hastings.
Before we move on, just pointing out, I'm looking over the combined materials. And there's all kinds of notice about 24-hour reporting, no question about that. But I looked at the second sheet here, the filing schedule. And what caught my eye is the heading for the 24-hour reports is 24-hour reports for uncontested candidates. Isn't that for all candidates?
It is for all candidates and, all the other explanatory materials convey that they're for
Yeah,
all
they do.
candidates, and I'm really not sure. There must be a reason that is there, but it could mislead someone.
Contested candidates.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate you bringing it up because it could
There are
mislead.
plenty of other warnings to candidates that
Yeah.
it applies to contested.
Yeah, I'm really not, that must be there for a reason, but it actually is a problem that's there, so.
It's just a.
It's a typo. Okay.
It should be.
It's a typo.
Sorry.
It's not
Okay.
contested. Uncontested candidates are not required to file.
Oh, so uncontested candidates aren't required.
Correct. All of these candidates, for you today were contested in the general election. I'm not sure how that made it too many rounds. That our guys materials make it, but we'll make sure to remove it next time.
Terrific. Thank you very much.
Sorry, everybody.
I don't think anybody is making a defense if they misread that.
No.
But now we have a new Commissioner Hastings standard. to abide by.
Thank you very much. That was a great. Okay, let's move on to item number 3, which is a request for waiver of a late filing penalty from the Honorable Ronald Russell. Is he here or is he? Oh, he's on the video. Is that you, Representative Russell? Can you hear us, Representative Russell?
This is not joined. And I obviously haven't joined, and I'm thinking on his end. Lori tried to call him to let him know that he wasn't joined and wasn't able to get through. I think I might force him out.
Yep.
So that he has to come back in, if that's all right.
Yeah, sure.
And being.
Can we hold a sign up that says join?
The chance to not be able to hear us.
It doesn't seem that he can hear us at all.
Is he seeing us?
Did the chat function work? Would you see that?
Yeah, I'll try chatting.
Oh,
Mine too. Mine too.
I think so.
Sorry, I'm relatively new with this.
No, that's fine.
This is which camera is this?
There you go. And really see it.
Can't see it? There you go. See it now? Yeah, okay.
I think we just.
Can you hear us, Representative Russell?
I
We can,
have unmuted my audio.
yeah, I was gonna say, he just,
Can you hear us?
I can see everybody. I think I've joined.
can you hear us?
Can you hear us?
I think no.
Not sure.
His volume must be down on his computer.
Yeah, that's gonna be harder to write.
I can try again.
Will you try that chat with him? But, no.
Yeah, mine blew up.
Yeah,
Okay.
No.
Got pieces. Government entities, yeah. Oh, thanks. Maybe you're on.
Oops, sorry.
We're sure. Can you hear us now, Representative Russell?
Yeah, I'm with you now. Sorry.
Okay, great. We're just taking up your request for a waiver. I'm gonna ask Jonathan Wayne to give us some factual background, and then we'll ask you to discuss it with us.
Great.
Mr. Wayne.
Representative Russell was a replacement candidate for the House of Representatives, which means his campaign started around June or July. And he explains in his waiver request that he read our educational materials closely, but he missed, he did not see the email from our candidate registrar, Lori Brand, because he didn't recognize the name, which the October 25th email that provide him information about the 24-hour report. So he placed an ad with the Ellsworth American on October 28th, and the amount was $1,513. So that was required to be in a 24-hour report filed with us on October 29th. The report was not filed until December, and the preliminary penalty is $1,573, and he's requesting a waiver. And in his letter, he also offers to be a sort of a cautionary tale for future candidates in our guidebook, which we'll get into it at some point if you'd like. But the staff is recommending a reduction to $350, which is the same for this item and the next two as well.
Great. Does anybody have questions for Mr. Wayne? Okay, terrific. Representative Russell, thank you for volunteering to be a cautionary tale. Would you like to address the commission?
I think that expressed sort of what happened to me. I did get into the campaign after a caucus on, I believe, July 27th. So it started up in August. And the material that you sent me was clear. I read it a couple of times. And Aaron Gordon in particular was extremely helpful along the way. My wife agreed to be my treasurer. And so between her and I, we made the reports, and thanks to Aaron's frequent reminders, we didn't really have any problems. I did make numerous phone calls to her. And I certainly read about the 12-day report, but just missed it until it popped up on my screen when we were making the final 42-day report. So I look back to sort of see why I missed it. I'm not sort of putting any blame on Lori, but it was the only email I did get from Aaron's partner in helping us. So I guess maybe I came to rely on those reminders a little too much. So it wasn't intentional, but I went back and did reread it, and it certainly forewarned me about a fine that would grow over time, but I just missed it.
Thank you very much, Representative. Do any commissioners have questions for Representative Russell? Okay, with no questions, I will move that we reduce Representative Russell's penalty to $350. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Terrific. It's been moved and seconded that the penalty is reduced to $350. Is there discussion?
Yeah, I am wondering, we might, I know I'm not following the Robert's Rules process, but I think a $300 penalty, I'm looking at the history. This is a late candidate who, although the report was significantly late based on the number of dates, that's clear because he didn't know what he didn't know until he got that later on report. In terms of dollar amounts, it's not significantly higher than the $1,000 amount. And I think for this late, candidate, replacement candidate for a first-time error, that $300 is a sufficient penalty.
So you would make a motion to amend
Yes, that's right. That's what I'm doing.
All right. Is there a second to amend the motion to reduce the fine to $300? Okay, the motion fails for lack of a second. So we're back to considering reducing the fine to $350. Is there further discussion? Okay, we can move on to a vote. All commissioners who agree to reduce the penalty to $350, please say aye.
Aye.
All commissioners who oppose that, please say no. Okay, it's unanimous. We're going to reduce the penalty to $350, Representative. And
Well, thank you for your consideration.
Well, thank you for appearing. It always helps the commission to have someone here to help us through.
Sure. Thanks for your work.
Okay, let's move on to agenda item 4. Request for a waiver of late filing penalty from the Honorable Reagan Paul. Are you here? Terrific. Please come forward. You can sit at the witness table there. Did I pronounce your first name correctly? Okay, good. So we're going to handle this the same way. We're going to ask Mr. Wayne to give us a factual background, and then we'll ask you to give us some further facts.
Well, Representative Paul was a first-time candidate in last year's elections, and she ordered some printed material, campaign materials in the amount of $1,986. She ordered them on October 31st, and she paid for them on November 3rd. And the report, there was no 24-hour report until December, and so the preliminary penalty is $1,945, and she's asking for a waiver. And she explains she's a first-time candidate. There's a steep learning curve in understanding all the requirements to file reports. Her regular practice was that she would report expenditures when they cleared the bank, and she explains that it's just such a super busy time, a hectic time in those last 2 weeks before the election, that I think she said she stopped looking at the bank account for the expenditure. That was my takeaway on the reasons for the request. I shared with her just before the meeting that the commission does have a history of assessing a partial penalty, even in good faith cases where people don't understand the requirements or there's a communication error or something, just to reinforce the need to get the reports in. The commission staff was recommending $350, but we absolutely recognize that there are distinctions to be made among the different cases, and you'll weigh the factors.
Sure.
According. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wayne.
Yeah.
Any questions from commissioners for Mr. Wayne? Okay, Representative Paul.
Honestly, I made an error on one transaction during the course of my primary and general campaign, and I apologize for my error. It was not willful or intentional, and I accept the recommendation of staff.
Terrific. Thank you. Does anybody have questions or comments for Representative Paul? Okay, I'll make a motion that we reduce the fine to $350. Is there a second? A second. Okay, thank you. It's been moved and seconded that the penalty is reduced to $350. Is there discussion?
I'll just say I would have moved that we reduce it to 300, but I will leave that.
You're welcome to if you want.
No, that's okay. I understand. Anyway, that's fine.
Okay. Is there further discussion?
I just want to repeat to Representative Paul that we get it. We understand humanity, and at least the ability we are, and we know about campaigning and how busy everything gets, and learning curves and the whole deal. My hope in this case is that you're bright enough and young enough to kind of spread this word around to help future candidates maybe not make the same mistakes, because we don't really enjoy finding people, but we're going to hold up the regs as we see the need.
And I also appreciate your coming here and other candidates on Zoom.
Yeah, it makes a big
Yeah,
difference. It
it
really
really
does. We appreciate it. Any other comments or questions? Okay, terrific. We'll move on to a vote. It's been moved and seconded that Representative Paul's penalty is reduced to $350. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, please say no. Okay, it's unanimous. Again, thank you for coming. We appreciate it. Okay, moving on to agenda item 5 is a request for a waiver of a late filing penalty by Neil McLean. And is there someone here to? Oh, yes,
I'm the treasurer for Equitable Fighting, and I filed the waiver request.
terrific.
Sorry, old habits.
I know. We'll handle this the same as we have the other. We'll get a factual background from Mr. Wayne, and then you'll have a chance to address. Mr. Wayne.
So Mr. McLean was a first-time candidate for district attorney in last year's elections. And on November 3rd, his campaign paid $4,600 to Rumble Up for campaign text messaging. The staff's application of the statute is that qualifies as an expenditure because it was an advance or deposit or payment of money to influence an election. So we believe it required a 24-hour report on November 4th. Because the report was filed in December, the preliminary penalty is quite high. It's $3,680, and we believe that's disproportionate to the violation. And the waiver request letter cites that this was the first time being involved in campaign finance reporting by the candidate and by the treasurer, and that Ms. Poulin, I think she can speak for herself, but it viewed it as sort of an advance of money or reserve on money that would be drawn down as text messages would be sent. And that it's, just disproportionately high. So the staff was recommending reduction to $350.
Terrific. Does anybody have questions for Mr. Wayne? Okay, terrific. Ms. Poulin, if you'd introduce yourself with your full name and address the commission, we appreciate it.
Certainly, my name is Patricia Pullman, and I acted as the treasurer for Attorney McLean's primary and general elections. I want to thank the commission staff. I want to thank them for their help throughout the whole process. I think they were wonderful. They were completely available, and we could not have done it without them, even though we failed on the sample.
That's really great to hear. And even though we have people here in a difficult kind of circumstance, we universally hear that the staff is just super helpful, and that is gratifying. It's really nice.
They do a great job. We accept the penalty that they offer. We thank them for reducing the penalty. I would be happy to go through my thought process and how I screwed this up as far as my thinking and learning about the definition is clear. I just was not thinking of it accurately during that time frame. But this process has also been very much a deterrent process and helping us. I'm pretty confident we won't make this mistake again. So thank you for your work.
Terrific. Thank you very much. Does anybody have questions for Ms. Poulin?
Not a question, but a comment, because you're obviously engaged and bright. And I would hope that if you ever came up in the future with a suggestion on how a different word or something might have helped you avoid this circumstance, that would be welcome feedback as well.
Yep. Any other questions or comments for Ms. Poulin? Yes, Commissioner.
I want to follow up on Commissioner Marble. I don't think we've ever had one of these where we thought the violation was intentional, right?
No.
Well, that there was an intention to mislead the public, but the legislature has told us through their legislation how important they believe these 24-hour reports are, and if we only dealt with the intentional ones and anyone that just made an honest mistake was left unpenalized, I think we'd probably really they're taking the teeth out of the statute. So that's, yeah, I think these are all very similar. They're all unintentional.
Yeah.
Mistakes, sometimes for lack of experience, sometimes there's always a good excuse, but
Well, they all occurred right in the run up to the election. And that's a hectic time.
well, by definition, at 24, anything within the last, whatever it is, days before an election is a very busy time for candidates. So, but nevertheless, that's one of the most important things I think that the public needs to know, where people are putting big chunks of last minute money or whatever they're putting in the last minute.
Right.
That's what the legislature has told us.
Right.
But anyhow, we're not singling you out.
No, I completely understand. And We will not make this mistake. I-
And several of us have been candidates, so we get it.
Yeah, that run up was certainly a learning from Russ, that last week before the election.
It's amazing. So is there further questions or comments for Ms. Poole? Okay, I'll move that we reduce the penalty to $350. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we reduce the penalty to $350. Is there discussion?
Ron said it.
Okay, we'll have a vote. All in favor of reducing the penalty to $350, please say aye. Aye. All opposed, please say no. Okay, it's been unanimously reduced to $350. So, and thank you again. Thank you for coming in. We really, it makes a difference.
Thank you, Rachel.
Okay, moving on to agenda item 6, a request for a waiver of a late filing penalty by the Honorable Sherry McDonald. Is Ms. Representative McDonald here or on the? Nope. Okay,
She was intending to come, but a medical situation involving her parent came up. We talked to her this morning, Lori Brand talked to her this morning, and she also sent an email. In her email, she said, her overall take is, we think that she would like to be attentive to her family situation, and she doesn't have a great desire for this to be carried forward. She is fine with the staff recommendation she conveyed to us this morning.
Okay.
In fact, in her email, she actually offered to pay the preliminary amount, which is $1,100. But in a follow-up call that we felt we had to make, she said she was fine with the $350.
and she wouldn't prefer that we put it off to another meeting?
No, I mean, well, I'm relying on Lori Brandt, who's not in the room right now,
Yeah.
but that was her definite impression, was that if you felt that you really wanted to hear from her, she could come back to a later meeting, but that's not anything she prefers.
Not her preference. Okay, all right. Well, I think we'll proceed unless anybody has a different thought. Mr. Wayne, want to give us a actual background?
Yeah, absolutely. This is not about a 24-hour report. This is about 2 of the regularly scheduled reports that were due 42 days and 11 days before the election. When she filed the reports originally, or her treasurer filed the reports, they stated that she had made no expenditures in those 2 report periods, but actually she had made 3 expenditures in those periods. They total roughly $850 or so. So those were missing transactions that should have been in the reports but weren't. And our application of the statute is that these reports did not substantially conform to the requirements and ought to be considered late. The 2 preliminary penalties add up to about $11,055. We think that's disproportionately high for 3 missing transactions. So
1,100.
I don't know. Yeah, 1,155. I'm sorry if I misspoke. Did I say 11,000?
You did.
Oh, sorry about that. No, $1,155. So our recommendation would be the penalties be reduced to $250 and $100 for a total of $350.
Terrific. Does anybody have questions of Mr. Wayne? Questions or comments? Commissioner Hastings.
Thank you. So this candidate did file the reports, and what I'm trying to figure out, what triggers a substantially non-conforming report? I assume that occasionally people file amended reports that make some adjustment, and that's accepted, and nothing further happens. These 2 expenditures total what, maybe 10% of the total expenditures over the whole campaign. Would it be different if these 2 expenditures had been omitted but then corrected in a campaign that may perhaps had $100,000 of expenses? What makes it a substantial expenditure? These are relatively small amounts.
Well, you absolutely have to. Again, we used our discretion, and I can explain what we do, how we do it. But if in your discretion, you view the reports as conforming when they were first filed, that's fine with us, and there'd be no violation.
Yep.
I'm not the one that makes this judgment call, but typically our candidate registrars look at a combination of 2 factors. What's the percentage of the contributions or the expenditures that failed, that were not reported. And then we also look at the amount of the transactions. So in this case, the amount of the transactions are not huge. One report was missing $579. The other report was missing $282. But on the other hand, that was all that was 100% of the expenditures that should have been reported were missing. So that was how we applied our judgment. But you're absolutely right. It's not, I mean, it's 3 transactions. They don't add up to a huge amount. But there is an element of judgment there in terms of whether we view the report as substantially conforming or not. So.
And I went through the same thought process in reading this. You know, I kind of wondered what that was, but the issue that kind of made it for me was that the reports were the blank reports. And that they totally left these expenditures on.
But there's a substantial number of reports that get amended over the course of the election cycle.
I might want to turn to
I
Aaron.
don't really know.
It is fairly common that candidate will, make amendments to their reports. So we really, when we're looking for substantial nonconformity, it's because it does represent a greater percentage of the total activity in our report. So in this case, I would say that was the logic, was that previously there had been no activity reports when there was activity.
This is kind of a tough one now, because but if the only expenditure had been $10 and it got picked up later, would that have
Yeah.
done then?
We would urge you to take a fresh look at it and just use your own judgment. And, if you think this is minor and doesn't amount to a substantially incomplete report, we have no objections. It's up to you.
Commissioner Marvel. Every once in a while, I have to show some potential to be a little stupid. So I want to make sure I'm understanding this. The campaign did not report on time in the regular method a couple of expenditures. Later, past those dates, reported those on their own by filing an amended report. Was there anything prompting that? Or did they sort of self-realize that they had not filed something they should have?
It was prompted by a conversation between the candidate and Lori Brand, and Lori explains in her memo that on December 19th, Ms. McDonald called Lori with questions about her post-election report, and during that conversation, Ms. McDonald realized that she had not reported the 3 expenditures. So then she filed amended reports to include the expenditures.
I'm just playing devil's advocate, wondering, and I'm not suggesting anyone was having this thought that what if they had simply not reported? Do we even know?
It would have been reported on the post-election report anyway, right? No.
I mean, it did come up in the conversation. Well, no, based on the date of the transactions, it shouldn't have. It always is assigned. It should go in the pre-election reports because of when the expenditures took place.
Yeah.
There is a risk that people don't report transactions, however.
Yeah.
But
Deterrent to the deterrent.
It should be out of balance in a final report, have to send.
Right, that's what I was
okay,
thinking.
thanks.
Yeah, that would cause the final report to be out of balance, wouldn't it?
Yes, absolutely. No, yes, it would be a problem that they did
Right,
that they
right,
omitted transactions, but
Right, if they omitted expenditures or contributions, it would cause a problem further down the line.
yes, it would. And Lori's in the room now, so if she has any corrections to make to what I described earlier, she should.
Ms. McDonald was in the process of trying to close down her campaign, and as an MCEA candidate, of course, she needs to be returning any unspent funds.
Right.
And that's when she discovered, this was in December, that she had missed reporting these 3 transactions. As you'll see in the penalty calculations, these were really very minor, would not have amounted to actually even a penalty for her because it would have been automatically waived. However, because of the length of time, it becomes a bigger issue. So and I asked her very clearly, is it possible that like the transaction that was reported in the 42-day pre-general, is it possible that that happened, say, in the 42-day post-primary? In which case there would have been no penalty because she had transactions reported in that report. The problem here is that she filed 2 no activity reports. So literally all of this activity was not disclosed to the public. And the small amount in the 11-day pre-general was actually advertising. And that, of course, went unreported, which should have been there for the public to see leading up to the election. So that's basically why this came down the way it did.
Laura, can you just clarify what you said in the very beginning that the amount would have been waived, but for the length of time, which
Basically, any penalty that's below a certain amount is automatically waived. So it never comes before you because we don't force people to pay like $10 or something like that. So they're very small penalties that they count as, say, it goes from 2% to 4%. So it's there. That's how it counts. So in this case, because these were discovered at the same time, we considered them as one penalty. So that's why she stayed at the 2%. But, if you look at the calculations, they were in fact very small. It's just the length of time to get it reported that created such a large penalty for her.
Yeah.
The way I'm viewing the calculation is that the daily rate of the penalty is quite small. So if the candidate had caught it 1 or 2 or 3 days late and filed an amended report at that time, the amount of the preliminary penalty would be so low that it would be automatically waived. But in this case, because so much time kept going, the
Yeah.
penalties are $900 and almost $300. Yeah.
is there a number below which it's automatically waived?
It's $10 and we're trying to get that increased to $25. Because the amount of time to do all of it.
Yeah.
Understood. Yeah.
And, in the statutory scheme, the kind of daily penalty is a measure of the harm to the public. So the longer something goes on unreported, the theory is the greater the harm to the public. So it's a rational kind of scheme. Are there other questions or comments from commissioners out there?
I mean, I'm inclined to follow the staff's thinking.
I am too.
I think $350 for these reports is too high. In this case, I think that we come up with a lot of factors. I certainly think that, right, there's a harm to the public. I certainly think you need to impose a penalty. And I think that previous cans have said that does have a deterrent factor, which is why we're doing this. We don't get any pleasure from it, but I think 350 on this amount of expenditures is just too high. And as we said, it's basically based on the amount of days, which happens to be about when she had this conversation that this information came through. So while it's important that we impose a fine, it's important that people file these reports. I think $350 for this amount of activity, both the number itself of the activity, even the amount, the expenditures themselves, as well as in relation to the full campaign, makes me think that 350 is too high.
Well, let's handle them separately, and I welcome a motion from you.
So for the 42-day pre-general report, I would move that we reduce that penalty to $150. And I'm going to recommend $50 for the revenue report.
Okay.
A total of $200.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
It's been moved and seconded that the penalty for the 42-day pre-general report is reduced to $150. Is there discussion?
We're still talking, my math is right, about 25% of the total expenditure. Okay,
Yep. Thank you. Is there further discussion?
Seems fair to me.
It does too. All right, it's been moved and seconded that the 42-day pre-general report penalty is reduced to $150. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, please say no. Okay, it's been voted unanimously that that penalty is reduced to $150. Do you have another motion to make?
I'll move that we reduce the penalty for 11-day pre-general report to $50.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded that the penalty for the 11-day pre-general report is reduced to $50. Is there discussion? Okay, we'll move on to a vote. All in favor of reducing that penalty to $50, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, please say no. Okay, it's been moved and voted upon unanimously that the total fine is $200 for these two violations. Terrific. We'll move on to agenda item 7, which is a request for a waiver of a late filing committee or a late filing penalty by the Aroostook County Republican Committee. Is there somebody?
No, she did not. She got my invitation first thing this morning, or I sent it this morning, but I did not see her come on.
Okay,
She was, no, if you remember, this was continued on from the last meeting.
yes.
I've attempted to communication multiple times through the chair and the rest of the treasurer. She emailed me at the end of the day Friday, apologizing for not attending the meeting. For some reason, she thought it was Friday. So I explained to her it was Monday, and asked if she would like a Zoom invite, and she said yes, but depending on work, she may or may not be able to attend. So that's what.
Thanks for trying.
Okay, terrific. Thank you. Mr. Wayne.
Sure, this is two late reports by the Aroostook County Republican Committee. The committee, well, all party committees at the local level are required to file a report, up to 3 reports during a year if they receive more than $1,500 in contributions or they spend more than $1,500. And so in the middle of 2022, Emma Burke had a conversation with the committee treasurer, Ms. Richardson, about this $1,500 threshold. And there was a recognition that the committee didn't have to file a report in July, but might have to file or would have to file the 11-day report in October. So the report was due 11 days before the election. That was October 28th. Ms. Richardson tried twice to log into the system, once on the deadline and then once 4 days later. But I believe no transactions were entered in any of those logins. So the report was not, the 11-day report was not filed until 9 days late on November 6th, which was a Sunday. And she filed the report, and the preliminary penalty, because it was 9 days late, works out to $500 for that report. There's also an issue of a late 24-hour report. The campaign made an expenditure of $1,500 for radio ads on Friday, November 4th. That required a report, a 24-hour report the next day on Saturday the 5th. If there's no 24-hour report filed on the 5th, she did log in the next day to file the 11-day report. So we're not sure why the 24-hour report wasn't filed the next day on November 6th. Emma Burke had a conversation with the treasurer on Monday, November 7th, and she explained she had COVID. She couldn't go into the office that day to file the report. So that report is 2 days late. Emma Burke filed the report. Now I'm reminding myself based on the conversation with Ms. Richardson. So that's why it was filed ultimately, is because Emma filed it. The candidate,
After discussion.
the candidate sounded clearly sick. Emma explains it in a minute. She said she had COVID, so we filed the report for her. So the penalty for the second late report is $120. And for the total of the preliminary penalties is $620. And the waiver request is from Mr. Shaw. who is the treasurer, or no, I'm sorry, the chairman. And he explained she was unable to file the 2 reports within the required time frame because she was suffering from COVID. So, I can turn to Emma to see if there's any other supplementary information about why the reports were late that we're aware of. Our recommendation would be to reduce the penalty, the $500 penalty down to 100, which is the track record of this commission. The commission has been very understanding when municipal and county party committees file reports late, and oftentimes there's a $500 penalty and it's reduced to 100. So we think that's appropriate for the 11-day pre-general report. And then our recommendation was to keep the 24-hour report at 120, which adds up to a total of 220 for the 2 reports. Thank you.
Okay. Are there questions for Mr. Wayne? Questions or comments from commissioners?
I just have a comment. I just want to, everything we've heard today is just what a great job the staff does. And that includes, your filing this report, based on your conversation. I just think that that's, on the commission, I really appreciate that. The goal here is that we don't want to find people, to get the information out to the public and comply with the law. So I just want to commend the staff for taking those steps.
I agree, and that's actually, it sounds like that's a frequent kind of thing that happens, is that a member of the staff determines that something needs to be filed, and they go ahead and file it in order to reduce the kind of accumulation of penalties. I think that's awesome. That really is great. Any other questions for Mr. Wayne or members of the staff? Okay, let's handle these separately. I'll move that we reduce the penalty for the 11-day pre-general report to $100. Is there a second? Second. Is there a discussion? Okay, we'll take a vote that the penalty for the 11-day pre-general report is reduced to $100. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. All opposed, please say no. Okay, and I'll move that the penalty for the 24-hour report is reduced to $120. Is there a second? And is there discussion? Okay, all in favor of reducing the penalty for the 24-hour report to $120, please say aye. 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 All opposed, please say no. Okay. So, Mr. Wayne, we voted unanimously to reduce those penalties to $100 and $120 respectively. Okay, we'll move on to agenda item 8, a potential Maine Clean Election violation relating to Frank Roma. Is Mr. Wayne here or no? Mr. Wayne?
Sure, I'm happy to introduce it, but I might want to turn to my colleague Erin and ask. A long time ago, I think we did anticipate that he was going to be here, and I had received an update. So, do we know if he's coming, or
He's not.
did he indicate that he was not, or has he been non-communicative?
He
Or
does not want.
okay, all right, all right. Thank you. He was a candidate for the State House of Representatives. He participated in the Maine Clean Election Act program. And one of the trade-offs of joining the program is that it inherently contains a spending limitation. The candidates commit to only spending money that they've received from the state. And there's a certain amount that they're authorized to spend, which is the seed money that they privately collected at the beginning of their campaign, plus their public campaign funds. That's their spending limit. They're not allowed to spend money from any other source. In this case, there was sort of a contributing factor that Mr. Roma set up his bank account kind of an unusual way, where he would pay things from his personal bank account and then transfer money from the campaign account to reimburse himself. He found himself,
Which is a really dangerous way to do business. When I was a candidate, one of the very first things that I did was I set up a separate campaign account so that I wouldn't run into problems.
yeah, well, they are required to set up a separate bank account. We do tell candidates that they are allowed to make a campaign expenditure from their personal funds and then reimburse it. That happens time to time. Somebody doesn't have a credit card with them, but they have their personal debit card. So that there are reasons for doing that, but it's pretty rare, as far as we know, that candidates set it up this way. So what happened was Mr. Roma made 3 expenditures of his personal funds in the amount of $756 for mailings and $12 to Google for a website domain, and then a payment of $175 for local advertising and a brochure. Those added up to $943. He paid that with his personal funds, but he found himself with not enough public funds in his bank account to reimburse himself. So the upshot, I should also add that he did return $173 to us in public funds that all candidates were required to do. He could have held on to that and used that to reimburse himself, and we're not sure why he didn't do that. So he wound up his campaign, he filed his last report, and he returned the $173, but he's in this position where he has, our terminology is he's overspent. He spent more than he was authorized to because he kicked in some of his own money as well. So we've explained in our memo that things like this have happened in the past. Good faith mistakes occasionally come up. Some election years we go and there's none of these overspending situations, but sometimes there's 1 or 2. Generally, the amounts have been smaller in the range. Well, they've almost always been smaller, especially for House candidates. Sometimes there's a $40 or $50 mistake, and a couple of times House candidates overspent by $250 to $350. Sometimes the mistakes occur because there's some sort of communication error. Or maybe a vendor hasn't invoiced the candidate properly, or somebody made an expenditure and didn't tell the candidate. In this case, there was no communication error because he was handling everything himself. The penalties, when we started assessing them for this violation, were only $50, and my best recollection is that was due to the fact that candidates were unexpectedly paying money out themselves to cover these campaign expenses. That was a hit to their bank account, so we only assessed by $50 penalties, but in retrospect, we wonder if $50 was too low for this particular kind of violation, because there's always a risk that a candidate could just negligently or willfully disregard the spending limit, and it's hard to suss out what is the degree of fault in this kinds of situations. So $50 may not be enough. The last time this came up, the commission assessed a $100 penalty, and in this case, we were recommending something of at least $200. 200 to 400 was our recommended range. Thank you for your patience. All that was in the memo, but I just wanted to make sure make sure I hit the key
It's
points.
helpful. Yeah,
Yeah,
paraphrasing. I
especially
think
since he's
helps
not
us
here.
out a lot.
Okay,
Yeah,
thank you. Yeah.
Does anybody, yes, Commissioner?
Just, it's obvious, I think, but just so Mr. Roma returned this $173.56, he could have used that to reimburse himself, and then he would have been whatever 943 minus 173 is. That's just so I get that.
Yeah, that's exactly
Just want to
right.
make sure it's as clear as it seems to be.
I mean, I forgot, we did float another idea in the memo, which is, I mean, depending on what you think the appropriate penalty amount would be, you could, if you wanted to, consider the return funds of $173 as sort of a partial payment towards that penalty. I don't know if that has any appeal to you or not. No. Then I'll.
Not to me. It made to other commissioners.
So anyway, that was something we thought of, because that, he really was entitled to keep that money and reimburse himself with it.
Correct.
Yeah.
I have
Commissioner,
Sorry, with respect to, on page 4, your last paragraph, you talk about, Mr. Roma's debts representing about 8% of total campaign activity, which significantly exceeds the public cases. Do you have any recollection? I mean, I noticed Mr. Katz, Senator Mr. Katz, candidate for Senate in 2010, spent $1,000.
that was the Senate campaign.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
See, just when people are pointing.
Right.
To point things out to me, right, there you go, okay. So do you recall what, I mean, are these, it's $29, $50, just normally it's a very insignificant amount, is that, or in the past, I shouldn't say normally, in the past, it's been a much more percentage wise nominal amount, is that?
Yeah, in 3 of the cases, the amounts spent were around $50 or less. There was a $200 case and a $300 case involving a House candidate, but our assessment is $943 is a significant amount of money to not to plan properly and to overlook how you're gonna finance that for a House candidate. So that's why we were recommending something higher in the $200 to $400 range.
Commissioner Marvel.
Just a couple comments, citing my own experience as a clean election candidate. And going back to what Jonathan said earlier, it's very clear that you're not supposed to exceed limits. I mean, it's just clear, you're playing with taxpayers' money and these are the rules and there's no question about it. And the other thing, although I don't want to say that I'm supporting fining someone for doing something I just find wrong, that's not within the regs that we're utilizing. Back to the idea of making all of your expenditures for your campaign out of your personal account. It's just wrong. I mean, it's a terrible appearance for anybody. I personally think 400 would be too much in this case, but I'd be open to 2 to 3. And I think this needs to be fined. Yes.
I just want to clarify, there's no allegation here that he fundraised beyond the main clean elections.
Good point.
He's
These were his own.
taking a personal hit here or out of his own funds.
Yeah, that's the consequence of.
I'll tell the commission what I'm thinking while we're in
Please.
discussion
Sure.
mode. I
Sure.
think that for the reasons that this memo states, I think importantly, I think 200 to 400 is the right range. I'm thinking 200. Looking at the past, I think we do need to increase the penalty for all the reasons we said. But it's $50, then it was $100 in 2018. Now we're doubling that again to a $200 fine in this circumstance. I think that, and he's taken the significant financial hit because of his own wrongdoing. So I'm leaning in the $200 range.
Would you like to make that a motion?
I'll move that we set the penalty of $200.
Is there a second?
Could I just raise an issue? I think under the clean election statute, this is a little different than a waiver situation. I think the commission needs to find a violation
Okay, sure.
before it assesses a penalty.
Yep.
Thank you.
Great.
I'll move that we find a violation.
Is there a second?
Yes.
Is there discussion about finding a violation? Okay, let's vote. All commissioners who agree that there's a violation. It's a violation of 21A MRS section 1125 paragraph 6. Please say aye. Aye. All opposed, please say no. Okay. We've unanimously found that there's a violation of the statute. Now, Commissioner Newman, would you like to make a motion about the penalty?
I move that we assess a penalty of $200.
Is there a second?
Yeah.
It's been moved and seconded that we assess a penalty for the violation that we just found of $200. Is there discussion?
Just to clarify, this is above the 176 that you would have been entitled to had kept it.
Correct.
I just want to clarify that.
Yep. And I think I'll just say that I think that that's an entirely reasonable penalty for this. The whole idea behind the Clean Election Act is that you're taking money for your campaign and that you're limiting your expenditures to that money. It's kind of a that's the limitation that you're accepting by accepting the amount of money. So I completely agree, and I think the penalties in the past have been a little bit low, and I think it's a legitimate and important thing for the commission to do to increase those penalties. So I support the motion. Is there any other discussion? Okay, we'll have a vote. The motion is to, if motion's been moved and seconded, to assess a penalty for the violation of $200. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, please say no. Terrific. It's been determined by the commission that the penalty for this violation is $200. Moving on to agenda item 9, an update on Matthew Toth and Clinton Pollimore. Mr. Wayne.
This is for your information, and we're happy to answer any questions that you have on this, and we're not expecting anyone to be participating on this, although we provided notice to them about it. This relates to two matters that were handled by the commission staff in 2022. And I was in touch with the chair, giving him a couple of updates, and I sent an update to the whole entire commission at the end of October. Candidates for the House of Representatives who are applying for Maine Election Act funds have to collect 60 qualifying contributions from registered voters in their districts, which are typically $5. So the candidate has to go to the voter and actually collect the $5 and ask the voter to sign a form that affirms that they gave the $5 from their personal funds and did not receive any money in return. And from our point of view, the signature on the form is important. It's sort of a certification by the contributor that they really did make a contribution out of their personal funds. And so it really has to be made by the contributor. The candidate can't make the certification for the contributor. So every year around 200 candidates join this program. And we occasionally see situation. Well, let me take a step back. We always look as much as possible at all the paperwork. And we're not just looking for fraud, we're looking to make sure that certain technical requirements are met and count contribution is valid. And this great work is currently done by Aaron Gordon and Lori Brand. It was formerly done by Emma Burke. And they look at it in a very detailed way. And one of the things they look at is the signatures. And if we have a signature on a check or a money order and a signature on the form, we'll look at whether they're consistent as much as time allows. And they also look for patterns and signatures that might indicate somebody is signing too many times for other people. Right? So in this case, these two cases involve two House candidates, Matthew Toth and Clinton Collimore. And in April, Emma Burke was looking at the paperwork for Mr. Toth, and she noticed things that were irregular, and she closely looked at the signatures, and the staff's conclusion was at least 12 of the signatures for the contributors were not genuine. They were not signed by the contributor. We started doing our own staff investigation. And let me just say that the staff investigations are not as easy as you think. We try to talk to the people who gave the $5 or if they gave the $5. And lots of times people don't want to get involved. They feel like there's a variety of motives, but they may feel it reflects badly on the candidate whom they support or on themselves. They feel like, oh my God, I've done something wrong. And just general skepticism about answering phones these days. It's hard to get these people. So but we did find in the case of Mr. Toth that after interviewing the contributors, we found 7 contributors that we were convinced someone had signed their names for 7 contributors, not the contributors themselves. And it did appear to us that at least 3 people didn't give a $5 qualifying contribution as well. So we referred these to the AG's office for more investigation. And we have done that in the past when this comes up occasionally. And that resulted in a criminal prosecution. So Mr. Toth was indicted on December 5th. And he, as I say in the memo, he withdrew in June or July after the primary election. And he did not qualify for the election funds because we noticed this in April. And I believe he needed those 12 to qualify. So not only was there fraud, but we didn't think he had enough valid seats to qualify. In the case of Mr. Collimore, he submitted a very large submission in April. I think it was about 130 qualifying contributions. And at that time, there was not a noticeable pattern that there was anything wrong with the signatures for contributors. And he had so many that were valid. I mean, he only needed 60 QCs to qualify for the public funds, and he gave us 130. And in retrospect, only a handful were invalid. So he had more than enough valid qualifying contributions to receive public funds. And we did not see a pattern or a problem with the signatures because they just didn't jump out, only 4 out of 130. So we paid him in April, and he qualified for some additional supplemental funds over the summer. So he received a total of $14,274 in Maine election funds. And then in the summer, as he kept giving us more qualifying contributions, Aaron Gordon saw a pattern, and that caused us to re-examine the paperwork and the checks. And our opinion was that Mr. Collimore had signed for the contributor in more than 30 cases. So we referred that. Well, we did our own investigation. We found 4 contributors who we sent them the forms and they got back to us by email or phone and they said, no, we didn't sign those forms. So then we referred it to the AG's office for more investigation. And that has resulted in a criminal prosecution. Mr. Collmore was elected to serve his first term in the legislature, so he is now a sitting state representative. And the AG's office saw and obtained an indictment of him. He was indicted on December 15th. So in recognition of the fact that this was about to become a public matter, we thought it was appropriate for us to provide you with an update prior to it being in the newspapers. And we also wanted to provide an update because we want to get the word out that we look at these, that this is, people may not realize the seriousness of what they're doing when they sign other people's signatures. It really does matter that they get the signatures come from the contributors. So there was a public education or a candidate education goal that we were seeking by bringing it up.
Yeah.
So at this time, the criminal prosecutions are ongoing, and we weren't going to recommend any action on any of these cases at the current time until those matters get resolved.
Terrific. Thank you. Mr. Bolton, are you conducting the prosecutions?
I am not. The criminal division of our office is doing that.
Well, I just want to say to Ms. Burke and Ms. Gordon, that's great. I really appreciate that kind of diligence. It's just amazing. And with the thousands and thousands and thousands of these that you deal with, to be able to identify potential fraud is above and beyond. So thank you very much from the commission. Are there other comments or questions by commissioners? Yes, please.
How frequently in the past has your office referred matters like this for fraud to the Attorney General? Rare?
That was the number that came.
Somewhere around 5 prior cases.
In the entirety of the history.
Yes. A couple of the times they involved candidates for governor, and it wasn't the candidates themselves, it was people who were trying to get a candidate qualified who made the mistakes. And then there have also been a couple of criminal prosecutions for candidates who falsely indicated how they spent the money on the campaign finance reports, and they actually spent the money on personal expenses, and then they, I guess I could say, fraudulently said in the campaign reports, we spent this money for campaign expenses that were made up. So those, we've heard those as well. Yeah. So there may be future discussion about this at a later meeting.
Just a quick question. How much public money was expended on the last campaign of this election cycle? You know?
In payments to candidates, it was above $4 million.
Was any of that for the governor or was that?
Yeah, before money has been returned. I'm sorry.
Did any of the gubernatorial candidates qualify or?
None of the serious candidates tried to qualify. There were a few other candidates who tried to qualify, but they didn't make it.
So the 4 million was essentially for the legislature.
Yes.
How does that compare to other years?
Sorry, I don't
Sorry,
have my.
I'm quizzing you.
No. I wish I had. I was just looking at the numbers for another presentation I had. It has been over $3 million per election year. There was a dip in 2020 in terms of participation, and I know that there was actually some significant increase in the cost of the program. It's above 4 million. So it was less than 4 million, and this is the first year it exceeded 4 million. And I'm sorry, I think it's 4.4 million that we gave out to the legislative candidates alone. So it's usually legislative candidates, usually 3 million. And then candidates for governor can vary greatly depending on who qualifies.
Did you mention earlier, maybe in another matter, the number of candidates that qualified in 2022?
Around 200. So I do want to underscore that fraud is rare. You know, we do closely look at everything. how they qualify, how they spend the money. They're audited. Our two candidate registrars look at every single expenditure on the page, and then our outside auditors look for the underlying documentation to make sure the reporting is accurate. And, you know, this is to the credit of everyday people in Maine who want to serve in the legislature, is that we believe misuse of these public funds and fraud is very rare.
Yeah.
But in any group of 200 candidates, you might find one or two who will, at the very least, make mistakes in terms of how they qualify or other aspects of participating.
And the charges of the indictments are fairly serious.
They're felonies.
Class B.
Yep.
15 counts and 32 counts. Yeah, reasonable.
And class B, class B crimes carry a maximum of 10 years. That's not to say that that's what will happen. That's the potential. Yeah, very serious, very serious.
Can I ask?
Yes.
I was looking to a different type.
Let me stay here just for a second, just out of curiosity. Have the, it's not the seed money, help me, what's the $5 term? The QC, thank you. Have those been at $5 since Maine Clean Elections began?
Yes.
And how long ago was that?
The first,
23 years.
the first election was.
Isn't it about time we consider an increase in that amount?
Well, that would be up to the legislature.
We could make.
We
this
could suggest that.
It actually is $5. For shorthand, we say $5. It's the people can actually give $5 or more.
Yeah.
Part of the spirit of the design of the program was that it was a very affordable amount for everyday people to be able to show their support for the candidate and help them unlock larger amounts of public funds. So the commission, or could propose $10 or something like that, but it was intended to be low, and so that would be sort of the counter argument that would have to be considered.
Yeah, it wouldn't have to be a long discussion, but I think that would be a good one to have at some point. What's happened to the economics of this program since 23 years ago? What proportion is coming from where? What does $5 mean from the average individual? All of those things.
Well, it would be interesting to know what the current distribution of funding for the program is. Yeah, how much comes from the $5 contributions, how much comes from the check. There's a check off on the tax form, right?
That's right.
It'd be interesting to know where all the money to finance that comes from.
We can present that to you next.
That would be
next
great.
meeting. Yeah,
That would be clear. Yeah, thank you. Any other questions on this issue? Questions or comments? Commissioner Newman, did you have?
Yeah, I'm just wondering if you could tell us where the proposed revisions to the statutes stand.
Absolutely. I talked with, we haven't gotten them back yet for redlining.
Okay.
But I did talk to the staff attorney who's working will be working on the bill. So
It's in progress.
it's in progress. Yes, thank you. Just looking for the right.
Awesome.
Yeah, I want them as soon as possible, but they have a lot of bills. Yeah, it's not printed. It hasn't even
Come back to you.
been drafted and given us a review opportunity.
Thank you.
Is there any other new business or questions for Mr. Wayne or Mr. Bolton? Mr. Bolton, I don't know if you fulfilled your significant or your requirements by being here today.
I
We haven't
appreciate that.
taxed you,
Thank
though.
you.
We haven't taxed you.
Yes.
He was good with it.
Yeah.
Fine first.
All right.
Have clean election numbers. It was loading. If you want payment information as far as the cost of the program this year.
We can do that next time.
Okay.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you. Does anybody have a motion?
Motion to adjourn
Yeah, that would work.
and move to adjourn.
Is there a second? Second. All right. We'll go directly to a vote. All in favor of adjourning, please say aye. Aye. All opposed, please say no. We stand adjourned. Thank you. Thank you all for.
Thank you.
Very efficient.
So.